Apache beauty closed her eyes for death, but opened them to a cowboy's burning gaze. The sun had barely risen when the young Apache woman stepped out of her family's small makeshift lodge. The morning air was crisp and smelled of wet earth and sage. She adjusted the blanket across her shoulders, pulling it tight as she walked toward the river that ran through the valley. Her horse followed silently, its hooves leaving soft prints in the damp ground. She had walked this path many times before, but today something felt different. There was a stillness in the valley, a silence that made the usual birdsong sound distant, almost as if the world itself was holding its breath. She carried a small basket woven tightly by her grandmother, meant for gathering herbs and wild roots. These were precious to the family, used to treat small injuries, soothe tired muscles, or make teas to calm the restless mind. As she approached the river, she paused to watch the water glide over smooth stones, sparkling in the morning light. The reflection of the rising sun shimmered across her dark eyes, and for a moment she allowed herself to breathe in the quiet beauty of the valley. But the quiet did not last. In the distance she noticed a faint cloud of dust rising along the trail that led through the hills. Her heart skipped a beat. She could not tell who it was at first. Travelers? Traders? Or worse, men who might bring danger to her family. She tightened her grip on the basket and silently urged her horse to remain calm. From her perch on a small ridge she could see the outlines of several riders. They moved with purpose, their horses kicking up the dry dust as they advanced. She stayed hidden behind a large rock, her body pressed low against the ground. Her mind raced, weighing her options. She could run back to the camp and warn her family, or she could stay and watch. Curiosity and a strange sense of caution kept her rooted to the spot. She had always been careful, always observant. The valley had taught her that life could change in a heartbeat. One wrong move could mean serious trouble. The riders passed without noticing her, their faces shadowed by wide-brimmed hats. She exhaled slowly, relief washing over her. Still, the tension in her body did not leave. Something about the way they moved, their speed, the seriousness, made her uneasy. She whispered a silent prayer, asking for guidance, for safety, for wisdom to understand the path ahead. By mid-morning she returned to her task, kneeling by the riverbank to collect the herbs her grandmother had instructed her to find. The soft green leaves and delicate blossoms were familiar, each one holding the memory of her mother and grandmother's hands, teaching her which plants healed and which could harm. She carefully placed the herbs into her basket, ensuring nothing would be crushed. As she worked, she thought of the family camp. Her people had decided to move closer to the hills in the coming days, seeking safety and new hunting grounds. The news brought a mix of excitement and sadness. She had spent her entire life in the valley, learning every stone, every hidden trail, every whisper of the wind. Moving would mean leaving behind the place that had shaped her, even if only temporarily. Yet, despite the worry of change, she felt an undeniable pull toward the valley, as if some unseen force was asking her to stay, to be ready for something she could not yet understand. The day grew warmer and the sun climbed higher into the sky. She paused to drink from a small stream, kneeling on the riverbank and cupping water in her hands. The cool liquid refreshed her, and she let her thoughts wander. She remembered stories her grandmother had told her, tales of Apache warriors and women, of strength and courage, of moments when the right choice could save a life. Those stories always carried lessons hidden beneath the surface, lessons she tried to carry with her each day. By late afternoon she had finished her task. The basket was full, and the weight of her careful work pressed gently against her arm. She turned to return to the lodge, guiding her horse along the familiar trails. Yet, something made her pause. A rustle in the brush nearby caught her attention. She froze, her instincts sharp, every sense alert. The wind carried a different scent, one she could not recognize. Her heart raced, but she kept her movements, slow and deliberate. From behind a cluster of trees, she glimpsed a figure. A man, a stranger, moving carefully along the path. He seemed alone, and his movements were measured, not threatening, yet the sight of him made her stomach tighten. She quickly ducked behind a boulder, peering around it cautiously. Her pulse was loud in her ears. She did not know his intentions. and in a land where strangers could mean danger, she could not take chances. The stranger stopped for a moment, scanning the valley with steady eyes. There was a calmness to him, something that did not match the uncertainty of the environment. He seemed to notice her horse, but not her. Relief mingled with caution. She exhaled slowly, trying to steady her trembling hands. What was he doing here? Who was he? Questions crowded her mind, but she knew she would have to be patient and careful. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the valley, she finally returned to her lodge. Her grandmother was waiting, sitting quietly by the fire. Her eyes were kind but sharp, noticing immediately that her granddaughter had been tense. "You have felt it too," her grandmother said softly, as if speaking to someone who could hear thoughts. "Yes," she replied. "Something is different today. The valley. It feels strange." Her grandmother nodded, not surprised. "The land speaks, if you listen. There are moments when it warns us, when it guides us. Remember this feeling. Keep it close. You may need it soon." That night she lay on her bedroll, staring at the darkened ceiling of the lodge. The sounds of the night filled the air, the rustling leaves, the distant call of an owl, the soft murmur of the river. Sleep came slowly, her mind turning over the events of the day. The riders, the stranger, the tension in the air. It all lingered like smoke, impossible to shake. She closed her eyes, hoping for rest, but instead felt the pull of the valley stronger than ever. She dreamed of wide open spaces, of hills that stretched endlessly, of shadows moving just beyond her vision. She saw herself standing alone, yet unafraid, feeling the presence of someone watching, guiding, protecting. When she awoke, the first light of dawn was spilling into the lodge. Her grandmother was already awake, moving quietly, preparing for the day. Today would be different, she sensed. Today, the valley would ask more of her than it had ever before. She could feel it in her bones, in the way the air pressed against her skin, in the way her heart raced with anticipation and fear. She had always known that life was fragile, that danger could appear without warning, but she also knew that courage was born in these moments of uncertainty. As she prepared to step outside once more, she took a deep breath, centering herself. She adjusted the blanket around her shoulders, checked the basket, and called to her horse. The valley was waiting, and she would face it with eyes wide open, ready for whatever came next. Little did she know, today would bring her face to face with someone who would change everything. Their gaze, a spark she did not expect, a connection that would challenge her understanding of fear and trust. For now, the valley was quiet, but soon it would speak in ways she could not ignore. The wind whispered across the hills, carrying secrets yet to be revealed, and the young Apache woman stepped forward, guided by instinct, courage, and the sense that life itself was about to shift in a way she had never imagined. The morning sun had just begun to warm the valley when the young Apache woman stepped outside once again. Her basket of herbs rested lightly against her arm, and her horse followed silently, stepping carefully over the rocks and soft earth. The events of yesterday still lingered in her mind, the dust on the horizon, the riders, the strange feeling in the air, but the valley seemed peaceful now. Still, her instincts told her to be alert. There was a tension she could not name, a presence that seemed to wait just beyond her sight. She guided her horse along a familiar path toward a grove of trees near the river, where she knew the best herbs grew. The soft light of dawn filtered through the branches, casting dancing shadows across the ground. She bent low, examining each plant carefully, picking the tender leaves and delicate flowers that her grandmother had taught her to recognize. Each movement was practiced, precise and careful. This work was sacred to her, a connection to her family and the land that had nurtured her since childhood. As she worked, the sound of rustling caught her attention. At first she thought it was the wind, whispering through the branches. But then it became sharper, deliberate. Her horse lifted its head, ears pointed toward the sound. Her heart began to race, and she froze, listening intently. Something, or someone, was approaching. From the edge of the grove she saw a figure slowly emerge, a man, alone, moving with quiet purpose. He was tall and wore simple clothes, a wide-brimmed hat shading his face from the sun. In his hand he carried a rope, and a small pack hung across his shoulder. There was nothing aggressive in his movements, yet the sight of him made her tense. She had learned long ago that strangers could mean danger, and danger could appear when least expected. She pressed herself behind a tree, careful not to make a sound. Her pulse quickened as she watched him approach the riverbank. He paused for a moment, scanning the area with sharp, intelligent eyes. His gaze seemed calm but aware, as if he were reading the land as carefully as she did. She held her breath, uncertain whether to step forward or stay hidden. Her instincts screamed both caution and curiosity. Then, in an instant, a branch snapped beneath her horse's hoof. The sudden sound echoed through the grove. She froze, expecting him to react with alarm. To her surprise, he turned his head slowly, tilting his hat back just enough to reveal his face. His eyes, a deep shade of brown, met hers. There was no anger, no hostility, only calm, steady awareness. For a long moment they stared at each other, the distance between them filled with an unspoken question. She closed her eyes, expecting the worst. The world seemed to pause. The wind slowed, the river's murmur softened, and the trees held their breath. In that instant she imagined the stories her grandmother had told her, of moments when danger approached and courage had to rise from fear. She gripped the edge of her blanket, her knuckles white, waiting for something to happen. But instead of harm, she heard a soft voice, gentle and measured.
"Are you hurt?" the man asked, his words carrying across the space between them.
Her eyes flew open. His gaze was still steady, and he had taken a careful step closer. She could see the concern in his face, the honesty in his voice. It surprised her. She had expected anger, confrontation, or even violence. Instead, he offered help. Slowly she lowered her guard just enough to answer. I am fine," she said quietly. Her voice trembled slightly, but she forced herself to stay calm. "My horse stumbled. That is all." He nodded, stepping closer, but keeping a respectful distance. "I saw. Let me help you, just in case." Reluctantly, she accepted. He guided her horse to level ground, checking its legs and hooves carefully. His hands moved with confidence, gentle strength, as he inspected the animal. He watched him closely, noticing the way he moved, how he handled the horse as if he had done this many times before. There was a steadiness to him that made her heart slow from its rapid beat. "You are brave," he said after a moment, standing upright and brushing his hands on his pants. Many would not have stayed so calm. She looked at him, unsure how to respond. Brave? Perhaps. She had learned to survive in this valley, to read the signs and trust her instincts. Yet there was something different about him. His presence was unfamiliar, yet not threatening. She felt the weight of curiosity growing stronger than fear. I know the land," she said simply. "It is my home." He nodded. "It shows. You move as if every tree and stone knows you." A smile flickered across her face, brief and cautious. She had not expected kindness or compliments from a stranger, yet here it was, offered freely, without expectation. For the first time that morning, she felt a small spark of warmth in her chest, a strange sense of connection to this man she had never met. They walked together a short distance, keeping the horse between them as a natural barrier. She spoke of simple things, the best herbs to gather, the paths the animals took, the way the wind shifted across the hills at different times of day. He listened carefully, asking questions that showed genuine interest, and sharing small stories of his own life on the trails and in distant towns. They did not speak of fear, danger, or conflict. They spoke of the land, of survival, and of the quiet beauty of simple days. As they walked, she noticed the way he looked at her, not with judgment, not with desire, but with curiosity and respect. It was a gaze that felt different from anyone she had known. There was understanding in it, as if he could see the careful strength she carried inside her. She tried to hide the flutter in her chest, reminding herself that he was a stranger, that danger could still be near. Yet she could not deny the pull she felt, the inexplicable connection that seemed to grow with each passing moment. When they reached a small rise overlooking the river, he paused. The sun had climbed higher, casting long reflections across the water. She looked at him, searching his face for clues, for signs of what he might be thinking. He met her eyes again, steady and unwavering, and for a moment neither spoke. The air between them was filled with something neither could name: curiosity, respect, perhaps a hint of something deeper. Finally he spoke. "I should not stay long. My path takes me elsewhere soon." She nodded, feeling a pang of disappointment. She had hoped he would stay, hoped the moment could last longer.
"I understand," she said quietly.
He glanced at her, a small, almost sad smile touching his lips. "I am glad I met you. You have a strength I have not seen in many places."
Her heart quickened at his words, though she could not fully understand why.
Strength. She had always relied on it, quietly, without fanfare or recognition. Yet to hear it spoken aloud by someone who seemed to see her clearly, it felt like sunlight breaking through a cloudy sky. They parted at the edge of the grove, each returning to their separate paths. She watched him ride off in the distance, dust rising from the hooves of his horse. Her chest felt heavy, filled with emotions she could not yet name. She had expected fear, confrontation, perhaps even danger, but instead, she had found kindness, respect, and an unexpected connection. That night she lay in her lodge, unable to sleep. The encounter replayed in her mind, the way he had looked at her, the calm in his voice, the steadiness of his movements. She thought of the valley, of the river, of the herbs she had gathered, and she realized that the world was larger than she had imagined, filled with people who could surprise her in the most unexpected ways. Her grandmother noticed her quiet restlessness. "You met someone," she said gently, without accusation or curiosity, simply stating what she already knew. "Yes," she admitted softly. "A stranger. He did not harm me. He helped." Her grandmother nodded. "The heart can feel things before the mind understands them. Remember this feeling. It is a guide, if you choose to follow it carefully." As the night deepened, she lay on her bedroll, thinking of the man with the steady gaze. She did not know if she would see him again, but she felt the pull of curiosity and hope stronger than ever. The valley had shown her beauty, danger, and quiet strength, but it had also shown her that connection could appear in the most unexpected places. She drifted into a light sleep, dreaming of distant trails, of warm sun and cool rivers, and of a gaze that had met hers with honesty and care. She knew that tomorrow the valley might test her courage again, but for now she held on to the memory of the encounter. A small flame of trust and understanding in a world full of uncertainty. The days that followed were quiet, yet filled with an unspoken tension. The young Apache woman moved through the valley with her usual grace, tending to her chores, gathering herbs, and checking the river for signs of animals. But every time she reached a familiar bend in the trail or paused at the grove, she found herself glancing toward the horizon, wondering if she would see the cowboy again. The valley itself seemed to sense the change. The wind carried whispers through the tall grasses, and the river murmured more softly than usual, as if holding its breath. She could not explain the feeling, but it was familiar in a way that felt both comforting and unsettling. Her grandmother had noticed the subtle shift in her demeanor, the faraway look in her eyes, and had simply nodded, knowing that the heart sometimes felt things before the mind could name them. One morning, as she prepared to gather herbs near the river, she saw him again. The cowboy was standing on the ridge above the grove watching her. His presence made her pulse quicken, but this time there was no fear, only curiosity and a cautious sense of trust. She took a deep breath and allowed herself to step forward, meeting his gaze. He smiled softly, tipping his hat in greeting. "Good morning," he said, his voice calm and measured. "I hoped I would see you again." She nodded, a small smile touching her lips. I did not expect to see you so soon." "I could not stay away," he replied simply. "The valley, it has a way of drawing people back. And you—" he hesitated, then continued. "You are part of this land, I wanted to learn more about it from someone who knows it well. She felt a warmth spread through her chest. It was strange, this feeling of being understood by a stranger. He did not judge her, did not question her ways. He only observed and listened. She found herself walking toward him, keeping her distance yet allowing the conversation to unfold naturally. For the next several hours, they moved together along the river, sharing stories about their lives. She spoke of her family, of the lessons her grandmother had taught her, of the way the valley provided food, water, and shelter if one knew how to listen to it. He spoke of distant towns, of the trails he had traveled, of people he had met along the way. His voice was steady, confident, but never overbearing. She noticed that he had a way of speaking that invited trust, making her feel safe even though she knew he was from a world very different from her own. As they walked, she noticed small details about him. The way he adjusted the straps on his pack, the careful way he stepped over rocks, the subtle kindness in his eyes when he looked at the animals around them. It struck her that he moved as if he belonged to the land, even though he was clearly from elsewhere. She found herself relaxing in his presence, letting her guard down just enough to allow curiosity and connection to grow. They stopped at a small grove where the river widened into a calm pool. The sunlight danced across the water, creating patterns that shifted with the breeze. The cowboy knelt beside the pool, scooping water in his hands and offering it to her. She drank gratefully, noticing the coolness of the liquid and the careful attention in his gesture. "You are very skilled," he said quietly, watching her. "You know this land better than most. It is clear you respect it, and it respects you in return." She looked down at her hands, the basket of herbs resting lightly against her arm. "I have lived here all my life," she said softly. "The valley has taught me many things. I listen, and I learn. It is part of who I am." He nodded, understanding. "It shows. The way you move, the way you observe. It is clear that this place is part of you, as much as you are part of it." They spent the day together, exploring hidden trails and small clearings she had never shown anyone before. She found herself telling him things she had never shared with anyone outside her family. Small stories, memories, and thoughts that felt private and sacred. He listened without interruption, never judging, never rushing, and she realized how rare that was. In his presence she felt a freedom she had not known before, a chance to be herself without fear. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, they found themselves sitting on a large rock overlooking the valley. The sky was painted with shades of orange, pink, and gold. She looked at him, noticing the way the light fell across his face, highlighting the strength and gentleness in his features. For a long moment, they simply watched the valley together, sharing the silence. "You are different from anyone I have met," he said finally, his voice quiet but firm. "You have a strength and wisdom that is rare. I am glad I met you." She felt her heart skip a beat. There was honesty in his words, a sincerity that touched her deeply. "And I am glad I met you," she replied. "Even though you are from another world, you understand something about this one." The words hung in the air, unspoken yet understood. They both knew that their connection was fragile, built on trust and mutual respect, yet held together by something stronger than fear or distance. The valley seemed to approve, the wind rustling through the trees as if acknowledging their understanding. Days passed in a similar rhythm. They met whenever they could, sharing knowledge, stories, and quiet moments of companionship.
She learned of his past, the towns he had visited, the people he had met, and the lessons he had learned on the trails.
He learned of her life, the traditions of her people, the ways of the valley, and the values that had shaped her from childhood. With each encounter, their bond grew stronger, built on respect, curiosity, and a shared appreciation for the world around them. Yet, with this growing connection came a sense of tension. She knew that their worlds were different, that the paths they traveled were not meant to converge so easily. Her family would not understand, nor would his people. They were both aware of the boundaries that existed, yet they could not deny the pull they felt toward each other. It was a delicate balance, friendship, respect, and the hint of something deeper, held together by trust and careful consideration. One evening, as they watched the sun set from a high ridge, he spoke quietly. "I may have to leave soon," he said, his eyes on the horizon. "The trails I follow, they do not allow me to stay in one place for long." She nodded, feeling a pang of sadness. "I understand," she said softly. "The valley is my home. I cannot leave it, even if I wanted to." He turned to look at her, his gaze steady and thoughtful. "I know, and I do not ask you to. But I wanted you to know that meeting you has changed something in me. You have shown me a different way to see the world, and I am grateful for it." She looked down, her fingers brushing the edge of her basket. "And you have shown me that there are people beyond the valley who can understand, who can respect, who can see me without judgment." They sat in silence for a long moment, watching the light fade from the sky. The connection between them was unspoken, but undeniable. It was not yet love, but it was the seed of something rare, a mutual recognition of courage, kindness, and understanding. As night fell, they parted once more. She returned to her lodge, her thoughts heavy with everything they had shared. The valley felt different now, alive with possibility and memory. She knew that the cowboy's presence would stay with her, a guiding light in the days ahead. Her grandmother noticed her reflective mood. "You met someone," she said, her voice calm and knowing. "Yes," she admitted. "Someone from outside. Someone who sees the world differently, yet understands it in a way I never expected." Her grandmother nodded. "The heart can recognize truth before the mind does. Remember this feeling and let it guide you carefully. Strength is not only in survival, it is in understanding, in trust, and in the courage to connect with others, even when it is difficult." That night, she lay on her bedroll, staring at the darkened ceiling. The memory of their conversations, their shared walks, and his steady gaze filled her mind. She thought of the valley, of the river, of the hidden trails, and of the lessons she had learned about courage and trust. She drifted into sleep with the knowledge that life was vast, filled with unexpected encounters, and that even the briefest connections could leave a lasting mark. Tomorrow, the valley might test her again. There might be challenges, dangers, or choices that would require every ounce of her strength and wisdom. But for now, she held on to the memory of the cowboy, of his respect, his kindness, and the understanding he had shown her. It was a gift, a reminder that the world was larger than the valley, and that connection, trust, and courage could exist even in the most unlikely of places. The valley was alive with the sounds of early morning. Birds calling, the river's gentle flow, and the whisper of the wind through the trees. The young Apache woman rose quietly from her bedroll, the memory of her previous meetings with the cowboys still fresh in her mind. Each encounter had left her with a mixture of excitement and unease. She knew their connection was rare and precious, yet fragile. Her heart urged her to see him again, but her mind reminded her of the boundaries she could not ignore. She gathered her herbs and supplies, her hands steady but her thoughts restless. Her grandmother had watched her closely these past days, offering advice in soft words, reminding her of the importance of careful choices. "The heart is strong," her grandmother had said the night before, "but it must walk carefully in a world full of uncertainty." The young woman had nodded, feeling the truth of those words, yet they did little to quiet the stirring of hope and curiosity within her. As she moved toward the river, she saw him again, waiting near the grove where they had shared quiet conversations. His presence caused her pulse to quicken. He looked up at her, and his gaze held the same steady warmth that had captured her attention from the very first day. She walked toward him slowly, feeling the tension in her body and the thrill of the unknown. "Good morning," he said, his voice calm and inviting. "I was hoping we might meet again today." She nodded, unable to speak at first. I was thinking about you," she admitted softly. "About our conversations and the way you see this valley." He smiled, a small, gentle smile that made her heart flutter. "And I was thinking of you," he said honestly. "You have shown me a world I had only glimpsed before, I feel I've learned more in a few days with you than I have in years on the trail. She looked down at her hands, brushing a strand of hair from her face. I never expected someone like you to understand it. Or me. He stepped closer, carefully, not wanting to alarm her. Perhaps understanding does not need time. Perhaps it needs only honesty and the willingness to see clearly. They walked together along the riverbank, sharing small observations about the land and the animals. Yet beneath the calm surface of their words, tension was building. Both of them were aware of the boundaries their worlds imposed. She belonged to her people, to the traditions and laws of her family. He belonged to a world beyond the valley, with rules, paths, and expectations he could not ignore. They could not fully bridge the distance between their lives, yet neither could ignore the bond growing between them. As they reached a clearing near the river, he paused, turning to face her. "I must leave soon," he said quietly, his eyes reflecting both regret and resolve. "The trails I follow, they do not allow me to linger." And yet, he hesitated, searching her face for understanding. "I want to stay. I want to see what might grow between us." She felt a pang of longing mixed with fear. "I want that too," she whispered. "But I cannot leave the valley. My family, my people, they depend on me." And they would not understand. He nodded, understanding the weight of her words.
I know.
"And I do not ask you to abandon your home. But we must be careful. The world outside this valley can be harsh, and our choices may bring consequences we cannot foresee." The wind shifted, carrying the scent of the forest and the river. They both stood in silence for a moment, listening to the sounds around them, aware of the fragility of their situation. The cowboy's eyes softened as he reached out, offering a hand of reassurance. She accepted it briefly, feeling the warmth of his presence, yet she knew this moment was fleeting. Days passed with careful meetings, each one filled with cautious conversation, laughter, and shared wonder at the land. Yet the reality of their worlds pressed upon them. Rumors of rising tensions between settlers and tribes reached her family, whispers of conflict that made her heart ache. She knew that staying too long in the valley with a stranger could draw unwanted attention. Her grandmother reminded her gently that the safety of the family must come first, even if it meant difficult choices. One afternoon, as they walked along the river, she spoke of the dangers she had heard about. "There are people who do not understand," she said softly. "They do not respect the land or our ways. They see the world differently, and sometimes they bring harm." He listened carefully, his eyes serious. "I have seen such things," he admitted. "And I fear for you. I fear for us if we are careless. But I also know that some connections are worth the risk. Some people are worth the courage it takes to stay honest and true." She looked at him, her heart heavy with emotion. "And yet, we must choose carefully. I cannot abandon my family, and you cannot stay in this valley forever. How do we honor both?" He paused, thoughtful. "We honor both by being truthful and by making the choices that respect the lives we lead. Perhaps we cannot control all the outcomes, but we can control our actions and our intentions." Their conversation was interrupted by the distant sound of hooves. Both of them tensed, glancing toward the horizon. A group of riders appeared, moving along the trail that led through the hills. She recognized the markings. They were not her family. The cowboy stepped in front of her, protective yet calm. "They are just travelers," he said, though his voice carried a note of caution. "We should remain alert, but not assume harm." They waited, watching as the riders passed, tension lingering in the air. Once the danger was gone, they exhaled slowly, the weight of the moment reminding them of how precarious their situation could be. That evening they sat by the river, watching the sun sink behind the hills. The valley glowed with warm light, the trees casting long shadows across the water. She felt the pull of the connection they shared, stronger now than ever, yet also aware of the choices looming before them. "I do not want to lose this," she said quietly. "The moments we share, the trust, the understanding. It feels like something rare, something I cannot let go lightly." He reached out, brushing a gentle hand against hers. "Neither do I," he said softly. "But we must be careful. Our worlds are different, and the paths we follow may not always align. Still, I am grateful for what we have found here, even if it is only for a short while." They sat in silence, the river's gentle flow filling the space between their words. Both of them understood the truth. Their connection was powerful, yet fragile. They could not ignore it, but they could not act without thought. The balance between desire and duty, hope and caution, hung over them like the fading light of the sunset. The young Apache woman returned to her lodge that night with a mixture of joy and uncertainty. She had discovered something extraordinary, a bond with someone from another world, someone who understood and respected her. Yet she also knew that the world outside the valley would not easily allow their connection to continue. Her grandmother noticed the look in her eyes, the way she carried herself with quiet tension, and offered words of wisdom. "Courage is not only in facing danger," her grandmother said. "It is in making choices that honor both your heart and your home. Sometimes the hardest decisions are the ones that protect both." She nodded, understanding the weight of those words. Sleep came slowly that night, filled with dreams of distant trails, flowing rivers, and a gaze that had met hers with honesty and care. She knew that tomorrow would bring more challenges, more choices, and more tests of courage, but she also knew that she had discovered something rare, a connection built on trust, respect, and the willingness to see clearly, even when the path was uncertain. As she lay awake, she thought of the cowboy, the steady presence in her life, the kindness in his eyes, and the way he had shown her that understanding could exist even between people from different worlds. She knew that their time together might be limited, that circumstances could force them apart. Yet she held on to the memory of their conversations, their shared walks, and the quiet moments of trust that had blossomed between them. The valley, once simply a place of work and survival, had become a space of discovery, connection, and emotional growth. It had taught her lessons not just about the land, but about herself and the power of courage, honesty, and empathy. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying a promise of change and the reminder that life, like the river, moved forward, whether one was ready or not. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. She would need to navigate the balance between her heart and her responsibilities, between desire and duty. But for now, she held on to the quiet strength she had discovered within herself, and the rare gift of understanding that the cowboy had offered her. It was a bond worth protecting, worth honoring, and worth carrying with her through whatever paths lay ahead. The valley woke slowly to the light of dawn, golden rays spilling over the hills and glinting off the river. The young Apache woman stood on a small rise, her hair stirred by the gentle wind. The past days had been filled with moments that had changed her life. The quiet walks with the cowboy, the shared stories, the moments of trust and understanding. Now she felt the weight of the choices before her pressing on her heart. She thought of her family, of the safety of the camp, of the tradition she had been raised to follow. She also thought of the cowboy, of his kindness, his honesty, and the connection they had built in the short time they had shared. She could feel the pull of both worlds, the valley calling her home, and the memory of him pulling her toward a future she had not imagined. Her grandmother approached quietly, carrying a basket of herbs. She did not speak at first, simply standing beside her granddaughter and observing the valley with her calm, knowing eyes. Finally, she spoke. "The heart can be strong," she said softly, "but it must not forget the home it comes from. You have learned much these past days, not only about the land, but about yourself. Remember that. Whatever choice you make, let it honor both." The young woman nodded. Her grandmother's words were both comforting and heavy with meaning. She knew she could not ignore her responsibilities, nor could she forget the rare connection she had found. By mid-morning she made her way to the grove where she and the cowboy had met so many times before. The river sparkled under the sun, and the trees swayed gently as if urging her forward. She felt a flutter of nervousness in her chest, but also a quiet resolve. She needed to see him one last time, to speak openly and honestly before the paths of their lives diverged. He was there, waiting, as if he had sensed she would come. The moment she saw him, her heart lifted, but it was tempered by the knowledge of reality. He approached slowly, careful not to rush her. "Good morning," he said, his voice steady but carrying a note of anticipation. "Good morning," she replied softly, keeping her eyes on the ground for a moment before lifting them to meet his gaze. They stood together in silence for a few heartbeats, both aware of the gravity of the moment. The valley around them seemed to hold its breath, the wind carrying the sound of the river and the rustling leaves, as if echoing their thoughts. "I know we cannot remain in this place together forever," she said quietly. "The valley is my home, and my family depends on me. I cannot abandon them, even for this." He nodded, his eyes full of understanding. "I know," he said, "and I would not ask it of you. Nor could I stay here without causing trouble, for you or for your people. I wish things were different, but the world we live in does not always allow for what we wish." She took a deep breath, letting the weight of the truth settle. "I do not want to forget you," she admitted. "You have shown me kindness, understanding, and a perspective I never knew existed beyond these hills. And you have shown me something I did not expect," he said, his voice soft. "Courage, strength, and a heart that is both wise and gentle. I will carry that with me always." They walked together along the river one last time, sharing quiet conversation and simple gestures. She showed him a hidden patch of flowers, their petals delicate and bright. He helped her gather them carefully, respecting the land and the work she had done. They laughed softly at small moments and shared stories of their dreams and memories. Each word, each gesture, carried the weight of understanding and the bittersweet knowledge that this would be their final shared day. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, they reached the familiar rise overlooking the valley. The sky was ablaze with orange and pink, casting long reflections across the river below. She turned to him, searching his eyes for the right words. I wish we could have more time," she said softly. He reached out, brushing her hair gently from her face. "Time is a gift we do not always control," he said. "But what we have shared, it is real. And it will remain in our hearts, guiding us forward, even if our paths must diverge." She felt a tear slip down her cheek, quickly brushing it away. "I will not forget you," she said, "nor this valley. You have both changed me, and I will not forget you," he replied, "nor the lessons I have learned here. You have taught me more than I could have imagined, about courage, patience, and the strength it takes to live honestly and kindly." They embraced briefly, careful and respectful, their hands lingering in a silent acknowledgment of the bond they had forged. In that moment, words were unnecessary. The valley, the river, and the wind bore witness to their connection. As dusk settled over the valley, the cowboy mounted his horse. He looked back at her one last time, tipping his hat with a small smile. "Farewell, my friend," he said quietly. She watched him ride away, dust rising from his horse's hooves, until he disappeared along the trail. Her chest ached, a mixture of sadness and gratitude filling her. She knew he was gone, yet the memory of his presence, his steady gaze, and the kindness he had shown would remain with her forever. The valley grew quiet once more, but it felt different now. It was no longer only a place of survival and routine. It was a place of connection, learning, and discovery. She felt the strength of the land beneath her feet and the wisdom of her ancestors guiding her forward. She had faced fear, uncertainty, and the pull of desire, and had emerged with a deeper understanding of herself and the world around her. That night she shared her experience with her grandmother, recounting the days spent with the cowboy, the lessons learned, and the choices she had made. Her grandmother listened patiently, nodding, her eyes reflecting pride and understanding. "You have done well," her grandmother said finally. "You have honored your heart while respecting your home. That is courage. That is wisdom. Life will always present choices that test both. Remember this feeling and let it guide you when the path ahead is uncertain." The young woman nodded, feeling a quiet sense of peace. Though she had said goodbye, she knew that the lessons she had learned and the connection she had experienced would continue to shape her life. The cowboy's gaze, the shared moments, and the understanding they had built were gifts she would carry forever. In the days that followed, she moved through the valley with renewed purpose. She tended to her family, cared for the land, and embraced the lesson she had learned. The river flowed as it always had. The wind whispered through the trees, and the valley remained a place of life, beauty, and quiet strength. Though the cowboy's presence was no longer there, she felt it in small ways. The way the sun warmed the earth, the way the river's water reflected the light, the way the wind carried the scent of flowers and herbs. These reminders were gentle echoes of the bond they had shared, proof that even brief connections could leave lasting impressions. She knew that one day their paths might cross again, or perhaps they would remain memories treasured in their hearts. Either way, she had been changed by the experience, and that change gave her courage, wisdom, and hope for whatever lay ahead. The valley, once simply a place of home and survival, had become a symbol of growth, connection, and the power of understanding. It had taught her that even when life presents challenges, fear, and difficult choices, it is possible to act with honesty, courage, and kindness. And in that knowledge she found strength, peace, and a quiet joy that would guide her through all the days to come. As the stars appeared in the night sky, she stood on a hill overlooking the valley, breathing in the cool night air. The world was vast, full of paths she had yet to walk, yet she felt ready. She had faced fear, discovered connection, and honored both her heart and her home. And in the quiet of the night, she closed her eyes, smiling softly, knowing that the lessons of the valley and the memory of a kind cowboy's gaze would remain with her always.